A female college student unexpectedly got pregnant, but was abandoned by her boyfriend. In order to protect the family's reputation, her father married her to an honest man from the countryside. When they met for the first time, the man was shocked by Susan's beauty, so nervous that he didn't dare to look directly, and even his breathing became short, and he couldn't help but tremble slightly even when pouring water. Susan asked unabashedly,
Do you think you'd like to ask me?
I do.
So they met in the morning unmarried in the afternoon.
You're so fine.
It all seems incredible, but it seems logical. Wei was so nervous that he forgot to prepare, and he looked nervous when he put on his wedding ring. But Susan didn't mind. He didn't have much hope for this marriage. She married Ray only to cope with the pressure of her father, and deep down she still thinks about the ex-boyfriend who left her. However, Evo, fate is always full of drama. Susan could never have imagined that in the next 2 months, she would be deeply attracted to this honest man in the countryside. The first time she returns to Ray's hometown, Susan's eye, he'll seem out of place in the dirt of the countryside. The unfamiliar environment and the husband she just met made her feel a little nervous.
Here.
But Ray tried to take care of her emotions and diffuse the uneasiness in her heart with his gentleness and thoughtfulness.
Welcome home.
The space is small, but it is well organized. Ray carefully prepared a lounge room with the best lighting for his wife, and installed hot water equipment in advance to ensure that Susan can enjoy a comfortable life at all times.
Thank you.
This meticulous care made Susan start to rethink. This man turned out to be not the rough man she imagined, but a big boy with a gentle and delicate heart. However, the first time they had dinner together, an estrangement between them was revealed. As a graduate student in archaeology, Susan's field of knowledge is vast and profound, while Ray only knows how to grow potatoes, and his life, experience, and insight are relatively limited. The knowledge level of the two is very different, and it is always difficult to cross the invisible gap when chatting. Ray was embarrassed and had to go wash the dishes, trying to avoid the uncomfortable atmosphere in this way. At last, Susan couldn't help asking, "Why do you want to marry me who's pregnant? A pregnant woman?" There was a hint of helplessness and confusion in his voice. However, in Ray's view, Susan is not a burden or a trouble, but a precious gift from God.
Be God's will.
At night, they unconsciously returned to their respective rooms. Ray recorded his first encounter with his wife in detail in his notebook, and he did not want to leave out every detail. Susan, a chest magician, on the other hand, is mired in deep memories. He looked through the items left by his ex-boyfriend, saw things and thought about people, and tears couldn't help but blur his vision. Early the next morning, Susan wanted to go to town to call her family, but Ray immediately put down the book in his hand and drove her there without hesitation. In this vast land, the sun shines on it and looks extraordinarily vast. Susan looked out the window. An inexplicable emotion welled up in her heart. She offered to help Ray do some farm work, but Ray refused without thinking about it. He felt sorry for his wife, and he was even more reluctant to make her tired. He gently explained, "You just have to do some basic chores." Susan headed straight for the telephone booth, while Ray entered the library for the first time. She wandered from bookcase to shelf. He wandered from bookcase to shelf, her eyes eventually falling on the archaeological books. Seeing his pregnant wife, Ray's eyes revealed infinite tenderness and expectation. He then didn't hesitate to borrow books on baby care. At the same time, Susan Alders Esther in detail about the hardships and difficulties of rural life in the phone booth. However, ever over as he was, her words are always inseparable from the news of her ex-boyfriend, and she longs to know his situation. But the answers she receives are always as if they have not been heard from in the sea. After hanging up the phone, Susan's mood was heavy and complicated. After thinking for a while, he still took advantage of his leisure time to send a letter full of affection to his ex-boyfriend, so as to pour out his inner thoughts and concerns. At the same time, he hopes that this will make Suzu's life smoother. Under Ray's patient guidance, the intelligent Susan quickly mastered the drying skills, and a bright smile unconsciously bloomed on her face. At that moment, he seemed to feel the charm of country life, and felt that life here was not so boring. In the blink of an eye, Susan is already for months pregnant, and their marriage has just begun. Less than 2 weeks later, Susan asked Ray with some concern, "If the child is born early, aren't you worried that others will gossip?" However, Ray is not in the opinion of the unexpected world, and he affectionately expresses his true thoughts.
Best for us. They won't say a thing.
Why is that?
Well, they want the best for us.
A warm current surged in Susan's heart, and she instantly felt that maybe Ray, an unpretentious man, was more untrustworthy than her ex-boyfriend. In order to make Susan feel happy and raise her baby with peace of mind, Ray decided to take her on a boat trip to the lake and enjoy the tranquility and beauty of nature. The lake is sparkling and the breeze is light, and the slender figure of Susan is like a beautiful picture in Ray's eyes. He couldn't help but secretly look at Susan, and the seeds of love in his heart gradually took root and sprouted. And while quietly germinating, Susan also really felt Ray's gentleness and thoughtfulness. His heart rippled as well. To thank Ray for taking care of her, Susan decided to cook a meal herself. Her busy figure shuttles in the kitchen, Ray's quietly standing aside, enjoying the beautiful back of his wife. At that moment, an urge surged in his heart to hug her deeply from behind. But after careful consideration, he still restrained his impulse, and Susan gradually let go of the tension and vigilance in her heart. When Ray tasted the scrambled eggs she had made, his heart was full of anticipation, but the taste made Ray stun for a moment. After a short period of patience, he was so spicy that he gulped water. Despite this, he still took care of his wife's emotions and praised the food for being delicious. At this moment, the roar of an excavator was heard in the distance, breaking the warm atmosphere. Ray hurriedly left, leaving Susan stunned.
What are you doing with that thing?
You said you like to swim. Dig you a hole so summertimes you and the children can go swimming.
It turned out that during the Ray Shirley time of rafting on the lake, Susan had inadvertently mentioned that he liked to swim. This was an understatement, but it stirred up 1,000 waves in Ray's heart. His love is indescribable, for he knows that he is to pour knowledge to gorgeous love stories. So he turned this love into practical actions and expressed his care for Susan with gentleness and thoughtfulness. As night fell, Ray accompanied Susan to a country dance. Under the bright starlight, Susan curiously asks why Ray is willing to stay in the dusty countryside. She believes that such a life seems to limit the possibilities of life and constrains career and pursuit. Ray, however, replied affectionately, "I prefer to go home and sleep in a land where I'm at ease rather than wandering around." His words reveal a nostalgia for his hometown and a yearning for a stable life, which makes Susan re-examine this unpretentious man. However, she still felt that Ray was wasting his youth. Ray's life is cared for by the vast land and the affectionate Susan, and he yearns for this peaceful routine. In this relationship, Susan lives with breadth, while Ray lives with depth. Breadth tends to appear superficial, and depth tends to be limited. In terms of knowledge, Ray is far inferior to Susan, but in terms of deep understanding of life and emotions, he makes Susan ashamed. At the boisterous ball, Ray awkwardly explains that he doesn't know how to dance. However, as a novice, his gentle beat-to-beat movements still attract Susan's attention. At first, their dance moves were clumsy and exaggerated, attracting the attention of others. As time passed, they gradually found their rhythm with each other, and their dancing became graceful and fluid, like the brightest stars on the dance floor, attracting everyone's attention. After the ball, Susan stood quietly at the top of the stairs and waited, and Ray understood. At the moment, an affectionate kiss seemed just right. When Ray moved closer to Susan, she gently avoided his kiss. Susan still has reservations in her heart. She feels that she is not quite ready to take on the responsibilities of being a wife. Although this relationship is beautiful, it still takes time and patience to polish it. The next day, the room was filled with the laughter of the family dinner. Ray, who has always been keen to talk about potatoes, unexpectedly raises an archaeological question this time. Susan immediately realizes that this is a change that Ray has made to suit her interests. She was deeply touched by Ray's intentions and dedication, and a warm current surged in her heart. In response to Ray's affection, Susan decided to care for and understand him in the same way, taking the initiative to share the knowledge of the countryside and integrate into Ray's world.
Are you gonna plant some
Love
seeds
is
this
so deep and sincere. Although Ray is not good at expressing love in words, he always interprets the true meaning of love with practical actions.
I'll be.
When Susan said lightly that she liked swimming, he silently built a pool for her. When Susan showed a keen interest in archaeology, he quietly borrowed archaeological books and studied hard to have more topics in common with her. When Susan complains that it is too far to call from town, he does not hesitate to install a phone in his home so that she can stay in touch with the outside world anytime and anywhere. And Susan doesn't have to do anything. She just needs to raise the fetus at home with peace of mind, read and rest. On this day, Susan's sister came from the city to visit her sister who had lived in the countryside for a long time. When she saw the simple house in front of her and the ill-fitting, uncrumpled clothes on Susan's body, she couldn't help but feel her feeling in her heart. And her eyes were full of disdain and contempt for life here. Even when Ray walked home with tired steps, his sister raised her head high and glanced at him with disdain. In order to escape her sister's impoverished country life, her sister eagerly reveals to Susan a plan she thinks she has clever. She swore that with the power of the family, it is completely possible to fabricate a scandal of Ray's alcoholism and domestic violence, so that you have a reason to return to your parents' home, and even give birth to a child openly. But Susan did not hesitate to reject the offer. She explained that Ray must never be harmed, because Ray was the best man in her family, like a pure and flawless crystal, and his qualities of gentleness, kindness, respect, and humility shone in her heart. His soul is like a clear spring, which must not be tainted by any stain. After saying goodbye to her sister affectionately, Susan's determination in her heart became even stronger. She is determined to spend the rest of her life with Ray, looking forward to the days ahead, decorating their homes together, sharing their interests, interacting with joy, and discovering old objects that are full of time. We will have a brilliant archaeologist in our home.
I don't mean to disappoint you, but my granddaddy owned a gun. Sure he did.
Those 3 words were like a gentle key, gently opening the door in the deepest part of Ray's heart. She had a warm smile on her face that only family members have. It was a gentleness, unhappiness that Susan had never seen before. The small courtyard waited quietly in the long years, witnessing countless ordinary, unwarm days. The magic of love quietly blooms in the mutual foam of day and night. It's like an old wine that gets older and more fragrant. This night, Susan carefully prepared a romantic candlelit dinner, looking forward to the return of her beloved. However, when Ray stepped through the door, he was furious like never before. He immediately reproached himself for not allowing the dog to enter the workplace.
Get out! Get out now! Get out! Get out!
His sudden anger made the original warm and romantic atmosphere disappear without a trace. Susan was confused, and it wasn't until Ray took out the reply from her ex-boyfriend that she suddenly realized that she had forgotten that she had written that letter. Looking at Ray's angry back, Susan realized how stupid her mistake was. Ray couldn't stand his affection being treated so lightly. He gave up what should have been a romantic candlelit dinner and turned to work again in the snow. He didn't give Susan any chance to explain. It was the first time Ray had been angry since they met. In order to express her sincere apologies to Ray, Susan woke up early at dawn the next day and carefully prepared a hearty breakfast. Despite his sincerity, he received only a cold response from Ray, and her efforts seemed to be completely ignored. When Susan felt helpless and lost, the tears that flickered inadvertently in the corners of her eyes seemed to touch the softness of Ray's heart, and his steps involuntarily stopped. However, Ray did not speak. He stared at Susan quietly, and his deep eyes revealed mixed emotions. Then an owl's beck. He slowly picked up Susan's face and kissed it gently. For a moment, it was as if the whole world stood still. He couldn't help but ask Susan, who gradually realized that perhaps separation was the best choice for each other. As night fell, she was immersed in a nightmare, tears falling silently. In the dream, the unfortunate and ignorant past is like a shadow. In her sleep, she still couldn't let go, and Ray was still beside her, comforting her softly. It's just that those words seemed to lack the warmth of the past. Acutely aware of her mistake, Susan choked up and apologized to Ray, full of remorse and self-blame.
You are such a
She explains that Ray is the best man he has ever met in his life, and that she herself does not deserve Ray's affection. So after Thanksgiving, Susan decided to leave the place. In the face of Susan's departure, Ray chose to remain silent and did not open his mouth to stay. Thanksgiving is coming as scheduled. On this warm and special day, Susan said her final goodbyes at the dining table. Her voice was slightly choked, but full of sincere gratitude. She thanked everyone for every good memory given to her here, and thanked everyone for their sincere acceptance and selfless recognition. In this short month, Susan has experienced a deeper love than she has in decades. That love was like a sweet elixir, moistening her heart and making her feel unprecedented happiness and satisfaction. However, the time to say goodbye has finally come. Although her heart was full of reluctance and nostalgia, Susan still silently packed her bags. But at the last moment, Ray's heart softened, and he found that he couldn't go against that hidden sincerity after all. When Susan's figure came into his eyes again, her air-soaked eyes involuntarily reddened, revealing her inner fragility and reluctance. Ray struggled to use clumsy but affectionate words to try to hold on to Susan. He solemnly told Susan that he was willing to love her and her children, including the little life in her womb. He promises to do everything in his power to give Susan the happiness and peace she craves. Therefore, he earnestly hoped that she would stay. As he spoke, Ray took out the diamond ring from his pocket that had not been seen on the wedding day, and it shimmered with a symbol of eternity. Ray confessed to Susan again with affectionate words, but Susan did not nod in agreement. Her heart is full of guilt and self-blame, and she feels that she has caused irreparable damage to her beloved. But Ray's gentleness and understanding always tugged at her heartstring at a critical moment.
I know this could work.
I know, because someday you're gonna forgive yourself.
The just right amount of care made her feel warm and touched. The estrangement between them, like a hardened, silent iceberg, turned into a clear stream under the nourishment of time, flowing in each other's hearts and nourishing the hearts, longing for love. Susan finally put on the ring that symbolizes love. In the bitter, cold, and icy weather, she shone with the light of silence and hope, and she resolutely burned all the restraints. She threw everything related to her ex-boyfriend, including the necklace with her picture on it, into the burning flames. The flames jumped, devouring memories of the past and taking away the last trace of concern in her heart. At this moment, Susan finally let go of all her psychological burden and said goodbye to the past completely. The arrival of the newborn is like the morning light, sprinkled with the light of hope. He affectionately embraced this little life into his arms and regarded it as a pearl in his palm. He softly sang the lullaby that his father had sung to him, and the melodious melody echoed through the hut, warming every corner. Susan looked at the scene in front of her, and her heart swelled with infinite gratitude and happiness. Once again, she was deeply aware that Ray was a precious gift, like a jackpot in her life. It was his presence that made her world more perfect and fulfilling. The courtyard has experienced frost and snow in winter, and the flower garden is full of greenery again. One room for 2 people, 3 meals for 4 seasons. In the charm of ordinary years, they finally walked hand in hand into a happy spring. Some people's encounters are like shooting stars across the sky, although they are only a momentary brilliant meeting, but they burst out with a dazzling light. The warmth is like a bright star, shining in the night sky, lighting up each other's life path, and also igniting the splendor in the silence. The beautiful moment of that moment seems to be frozen by time, turned into an eternal picture, treasured in the deepest part of memory. Every time I think about it, I once again nourish my heart longing for love.